Okay, Tuesday edition of the After Show. Got Wink and Justice with you. Wink over here on the East Coast.
And Justice over here on the West Coast of the contiguous United States of America. Yes, indeed, our imperial reach goes to a 50th state to the west of where I'm at. And it is Red Sky at Morning Tuesdays here on the After Show, and it means really only one thing. Somewhere in the world, there's a storm a-brewing.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes, indeed.
And it might just be here also. Hey, Wink, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. What is it, 46 and sunny? Sunny day out there, but it's a little on the nippy side, but that's normal. Normal temperatures for mid-April, I guess. Right to get in the chat, just go to netrootsradio.com, scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat, so click that, join us there.
And it sounds like a broken record, and I apologize, but to the leftish of the chat room link is the donate, contribute buttons, and we're trying to raise funds to upgrade our hardware and software, and so your generosity is very appreciated. And that stated, podcasts can be had by way of Spreaker, though Wink has been, when he's got the time, he's been putting up the perfected file really quick. But look for those links on our social media, and you can also find them by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, yes.
Okay, here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently 47 degrees. That's what it says on the Weather Underground. It feels more, I don't know, like 48. No, I'm kidding. It feels more like over 50 right now.
Very good.
We are slated to have a high of 67, considered to be spring-like weather here. We are showering, though it has just let up right now, but there are formidable clouds still surrounding us. Rain is supposed to then become scattered showers with occasional thunder showers. I like that. And then tomorrow we're supposed to have quite a bit of rain throughout the day, and then drying out for maybe a good 4 or 5 days, which means, I guess, since I got the worker who's available right now, we're going to try to get some stuff done when we can do it when it's relatively dry.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Boy, I'm still repairing damage from the winter,
Yep.
In terms of getting plant material replaced, a few damaged things, like one of the swings got blown over, so I gotta find a better spot for that and repair the awning on that. The awning on the gazebo needs a few repairs. This is the problem, is that in my quest to be an artiste, I took on many different jobs, and one of those was sail making and sail repair. And in instances like this, you wish that you didn't know how to do it, because then you could say, well, let's buy another one or have someone else repair it.
Yeah.
But no,
exactly.
I'm stuck. It's sort of like, once you've learned how to cook a proper Italian meal, it's hard to go out and spend all that money on one at a restaurant.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, wait a second. It's that simple? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So sail repair, canvas repair. Oh, that's another one of those instances that if you go to a hardware store and you go, I have some canvas that needs to be repaired, and they go, okay, it costs this much. You go, that's pretty good. And then they look up, they go, oh, is this for a maritime application? And you forget and say yes, and then it's double the amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to remember, oh no, not maritime at all. So eek. Yep. Amazing. It's almost like, well, not almost, but I likened it to sometimes like being a woman, because the same kind of clothes in many ways. I mean, or look at it this way: there's a lot less fabric in a dress than there are in what a guy wears. Why does the dress cost so much more? Why does the dress cost so much more? I don't know. Because it's for a woman, I guess. Jack the price up. And, since they name ships and water vessels after women, I just figured it was an extension of that. So, is it a maritime application? Yeah. Oh, no. And the guy goes, nope, you said yes. Okay. How much length of cordage do you need? And then, first of all, don't go in and call it cordage. They'll jack the price up. Call it rope.
Yeah, there you go.
And then you get what we in the trades would call the homeowner price, which sometimes can be a little bit more expensive too. So you got to be careful. Well, we're not blown up yet, Wink.
No.
Not yet. And like the best case scenario is hoping that the North Koreans don't really have, a missile that can get very far.
Right.
Because it doesn't look like we're trying to ratchet that thing down. We got Pence out there right now saying, hey, they better behave. And we blew up Syria and a few other places because we were trying to tell, your guy in North Korea to mellow out. And as soon as we did that, did Kim Jong, what's his name, mellow out?
Yeah.
No. He ratcheted it up. And of course, we don't have to worry really about whether they have, the technical or, the abilities to lob something over to us on the West Coast. Because they don't. But they don't have very far. They could just use conventional weapons, artillery to blow up Seoul. And how many, 10 million people there? Right. I mean, it's one of the largest urban centers in the world. So I guess Pence feels, they're just Koreans. We can bargain with their lives. And Pence has the proper kind of like central casting, vice presidential. He actually looks fairly presidential because, I'm here to relay a message from our dear leader, Donald Trump. North Korea better behave. The time for strategic patience is over. I love that strategic patience. Because that was what apparently we've been doing since the end of the Korean War. And,
right.
It's over now. Okay? Because Trump has had a 30-year obsession with blowing up a nuke. It's only been documented. He gets a hard-on for it. So we got that going for us, I think.
Yep.
I shouldn't dally because we do have Chris Reeves today, and we're going to get some updates on the Georgia special election.
Yeah, today, and, I think. Yeah.
And various ways of looking at it. I mean, first of all, I don't like putting all my eggs in one basket. Like, this is the race that's supposed to be the referendum on everything Trump, right?
Right.
Of course, who keeps saying that? The right wing, because they want it to be. Right.
Sure.
He won. Yeah. He won. Stop asking questions about his criminality. What? What happened for 8 years with Obama? Oh, God. Before I go on, I was looking over, photographs of the Obamas, Michelle and Barack, and how loving and affectionate they were. I mean, just embodied everything that's like good about America. Right. And then you look at Trump and poor, I don't know how to address Melania too much. I don't know whether she's like the poor woman, that we should feel sorry for because she's trapped in this, loveless relationship. But I've also heard her speak, and, she's got a level of racism that just kind of oozes, So I don't know. But regardless, there's not much there with them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So just the imagery of it. They never hold hands, and when they do, he's got like a fist, and then she has her hand underneath his fist. So he's kind of like resting his hand on hers, and she's like, I don't know. It's a weird posture of superiority and submission. I just don't like that. It doesn't, then you saw the Obamas and just, I don't know, the love. And I like to think that's what we are, the love, but not for now, apparently. Well, I better get on this, as I said. So these are the issues we will be attending to today. Federal investigators know that Trump has deep links to organized crime, and the public is just now starting to catch up. Well, not here on the after show.
Right.
We've been quoting David K. Johnson, who's been on the case since the 80s. That feisty group of Wells Fargo employees who expose the bank's wrongdoing are virtually ignored by the media. Yeah, that's right. But not here. This part of the media, we give them their due. And America's manufactured amnesia puts everyone in peril. That's right, American amnesia, as Gorbachev called it. And as I prefaced earlier in the show, for the last half, we do visit with Chris Reeves, always affectionately known as Tom Servo 433. We're going to get a follow-up on the Kansas Congressional District 04 election, along with an update on today's Georgia special election with Ossoff. Another hospital prepares to close in Kansas, and Brownback scrambling to figure out what the hell to do. And Chris Kobach is ordered by a federal judge to turn over the immigration documents he was photographed taking into the White House. Now, what is it exactly that you told the President of the United States? All that, well, I don't know. Maybe Trump could say it's presidential prerogative. I can't tell you, what we know because it's all made up.
Right.
Well, all that plus the Connect Unite Act Daily Codes community calendar and more. There's always more on the after show with that ever so fine fellow over there on the East Coast, and his name is Wink, and this guy back over here on the West Coast, and my name is Justice. And we do this here on the after show on Netroots Radio for 5 days a week for an hour-ish in this particular, specific, and peculiar tear in the fabric of space-time, because who loves you, baby? Okay. Got to catch up here, buddy. We got Chris on,
yes,
and we want to dally.
Yep.
All right. This article is by Jefferson Morley out of Alternet. As Trump built his empire, he attracted a criminal element whose ties still bind. All you need to know is that his mentor was Roy Cohn, and that's all you need to know about a criminal element, And I'm not talking about him being counsel to McCarthy. I'm talking about the stuff he did afterwards with the Gambinos and even the Teflon Don. Cohn was everywhere in New York mob circles. Well, as Trump discovers, and they use the P word with Trump consistently throughout this article. I have a hard time calling him president. So here we follow the Netroots Radio style book, and it says right there, shall be referred to as Trump or Donald Trump. Okay? We're just following the style book, which we wrote. As Trump discovers the prerogative of unilaterally making war, the media gaze is turned away from the ongoing FBI House and Senate investigation of his Russia ties to the simpler dramas of cruise missiles, big bombs, and tough but loose talk on North Korea. Yet even the mother of all bombs cannot obliterate the accumulating body of evidence about his relationship with Russian organized crime figures and the not unrelated question about whether he and his entourage colluded with Russian officials in the 2016 presidential election. The story, notes Talking Points Memo's Josh Marshall, is hiding in plain sight. As just a little side note, let me interject, because throughout the all the news that's fit to read segment in the top half of the after show, there's also interspersed in this reporter's opinion, as if you can't tell. And I've been hearing some chatter, and we're still tracking it down, but it's something that we have speculated here on the after show. How much was McConnell and Ryan in on distributing possibly illegal Russian money contributions? And is that why they are so game on trying to keep these investigations from going on? Because what happens if the things that we suspected all along is that the Republicans are so obsessed with power that they would collude with a foreign government in which to be able to consolidate their power? And then when you think of the Koch network and how they're set up, it's on the Russian model, Soviet model. And how is that? Because Dad did some work with Stalin and then came back to America and blamed everything of the New Deal as if it was Stalinist. And then set out to dismantle every aspect of things that could be considered liberal because it will become Stalin. Weird, huh? And how did they accomplish this? By setting up the 70-year Soviet model. Coming to fruition, hasn't it? Okay, that's just an ancillary to it. The evidence on Trump's organized crime ties is stronger, says Marshall. If we'd never heard about Russian intelligence hacking in the 2016 election, or Carter Page, or Manafort, or Kislyak, these organized crime connections would seem like an extraordinarily big deal, and indeed it is an extraordinarily big deal. Chronologically speaking, Trump's ties to organized crime figures came first. Mutually beneficial transactions dating back to the 90s led to closer relations in the 2000s and culminated in the contacts during the 2016 campaign. It all began with Russians who wanted to get their money out of the country, meaning their country, launder it, and buy Trump properties for hundreds of times over their listed price. What's up with that? Okay, so it goes on, and in many ways, this article does mirror David K. Johnston's seminal work in this area, and that is Donald Trump's organized crime ties. And we think a lot of it just being, New York mobsters, but it totally morphed into Russian connections when Trump was unable to get loans from reputable banks. And Deutsche Bank, which was laundering money at the time for Russians, mobsters, was the only one. And now, of course, we don't know that Deutsche Bank has paid quite a bit in relative terms, in our relative terms, maybe not for them, for laundering money for Russian mobsters. I don't know, Wink. It's like walks, talks. They also, the article also gets deep into the Cyprus Bank connection, Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross was, he actually stated when he was testifying in front of the Intelligence Committee is that Donald Trump ordered him not to talk anything about the bank stuff in Cyprus. So he didn't. All right. The article is quite comprehensive, of course, and the link is in the Daily Co's diary show notes as well as on our blogger. So I'll sum up, though. The story right now, Josh Marshall says, is confusing as hell. The key, he explains, is the pattern. These ties link up, coalesce, organize, and resolve. These are relationships that make some sense. So we need to get below what we can see on the surface and see what actually happened. I don't know who's going to be indicted, but boy, I do know this. The American people need to get the facts, and then justice will be done. Yep. If there's one thing that Americans like to do, it's create heroes and then tear them down utterly. Sometimes they rise back up, and a lot of times maybe they don't because, On the other hand, I don't know. Look what's happened to Kissinger, for instance. Okay. Wells Fargo employees exposed. I don't know why this happened. I inadvertently hit the zoom on my page here and think the script's gotten smaller, which doesn't help me. I need it larger. Okay, this article is by Peter Dreyer out of the American Prospect. Front page stories in Tuesday's New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and LA Times reveal that Wells Fargo's board would be slashing, and this is last Tuesday, by the way, $75 million in compensation from two former top executives whom it blamed for the bank's scandal over fraudulent accounts. But missing from these three paper stories and from similar stories in other major print and broadcast news outlets was the feisty group of bank employees that initially exposed the wrongdoing, the Committee for Better Banks. A report issued Monday by a four-person committee of Wells Fargo's board determined that John G. Stumpf, the former CEO, and Carrie L. Tolstedt, the former head of community banking, both of whom were ousted last year, were primarily responsible for pressuring low-level employees to create and foist 2 million unwanted bank and credit card accounts on unsuspecting customers. Unbelievable. To penalize the two former executives, it demanded a clawback, the forced return of pay and stock grants that industry watchers say is the largest in banking history and one of the biggest ever in corporate America. The bank's crackdown on Stumpf and Tolstedt was triggered by embarrassing media reports and government investigators who then investigated Wells Fargo's sales goal practices. Those practices first came to light in 2013 when bank employees, most of them tellers, and call center employees who assist customers with their personal and business banking needs shared their concerns with the media, government regulatory agencies, and members of Congress. The employees were brought together by the Committee for Better Banks, an advocacy group supported by the Communication Workers of America. Oh no, a union, wink! How dare they? The Committee for Better Banks works in tandem with community organizing groups like the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, New York Communities for Change, Minnesotans for Fair Economy, that for over a decade have challenged Wells Fargo's predatory lending and foreclosure practices, particularly in low-income and minority communities. By joining forces, the CBB and other groups help the bank's employees and consumers find common ground. Don't tell anybody, Wink. But it's essentially Acorn rising from the ashes as the phoenix.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
These are former Acorn organizers that had to find some way. And so what did they do? Well, of course, the people on the front lines, the people who make the least. And who was fired, Wink, when this was found out? Remember, we had this. They fired about 23,000 low-level employees who were making these fraudulent credit card applications because there was an incentive program. Then they had rah-rah meetings and meet these quotas, and you get to go to Hawaii and all this other, right? And people who had been working in the bank, this is the problem. Bank managers sometimes make not that much more than what the tellers are, and the tellers are making like barely a livable wage. And I have to say on some levels, I mean, these are the people that really care about their customers. And they saw them getting ripped off. They couldn't stand it. And so these bank employees tried to go through the channels, and they were getting fired. Branch managers, oh, you're bringing up the fact that we have this incentive program. Apparently, you're just not on the team, are you? And so what was left? Get this out in the public. And they did, and yet the media seems to not want to prop up these snitches, I guess, is what the term would be. Snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
For some reason, the whistleblowers are considered suspect. And even though they exposed extreme wrongdoing, snitches, I don't know, there's something about them, And that's, I don't know, it feels like that, doesn't it? It smells like it. All right. So America's manufactured amnesia. Gore Vidal coined the term American amnesia, meaning that we barely remember what happened last week. How can we expect Americans to know what happened before they were born?
Right.
Subtitle on this is that the U.S. has forgotten its horrific past, so now it and other countries are reliving it. With credit, this is by Frank Joyce out of Alternate. With credit to Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman for their long-ago description of how the media and education system manufactures consent, this article is about one of its critical components, manufactured amnesia. Simply put, the media treats everything it deems newsworthy as a discrete event that is taking place for the first time ever. So, for example, the white male supremacist presidency of Donald Trump is presented as something brand new in U.S. history. Of course, we actually have a long tradition of this, and I guess you could cite Andrew Jackson as probably the most glaring example. But that was so long ago. Who remembers that? Who even knows? Who cares? The manufacture of amnesia, never connecting the present to anything unpleasant in the past, is completely bipartisan. MSNBC does it just as much as Fox News, ditto for the New York Times and the Washington Times. Now, I might argue there's not much difference between these because of the management at the top.
Right.
Especially galling is the profoundly hypocritical coverage of the recent use of chemical weapons by the government of Syria. Not one mainstream story or opinion piece has made any mention whatsoever of the blanket spraying of chemical Agent Orange throughout Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia by the U.S. military in the 60s and 70s. Well, I don't know. We read about it in Daily Kos, but I guess maybe that's not mainstream enough.
Right, right.
And I will say it has been mentioned by people like Maddow and Joy Reid. So, but I get what's going on here, because if you turn on the kind of news that my mom watches, there's no mention of it. Meaning that, I mean, she doesn't watch Fox, but she watches like the regular network feed.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Okay, to this day, there are babies being born in all three countries with birth defects from the ongoing consequences of the vast use of this Dow chemical and Monsanto-manufactured toxin. Vietnam-era U.S. military veterans exposed to Agent Orange also suffer from its lasting effects. And I might add, frankly, every U.S. Indian reservation, where they stored this stuff in shitty 50-gallon drums so they would, leach all over and, kill people on the reservation.
Right.
And there's been big efforts in trying to clean this up. And, of course, for many decades, admitting that Agent Orange even existed meant they'd have to clean it up. Dioxin? There's no such thing as dioxin. Remember that? Do a search for Agent Orange on Google News. You'll find recent stories about complaints from poisoned U.S. vets over their treatment by the Veterans Administration. But you will not find even one story about Agent Orange in the context of the use of chemical weapons by the government of Syria. Nor can you find reference to napalm, another weapon used extensively by the U.S. military. Yeah. So we've forgotten it all. Or we just don't care. We choose not to remember or bring it up. Therefore, we can cite other people and keep the moral ground, high moral ground. Well, not with the antiseptic of us on the job, right? Well, we better get to our Jim Hightower break. We'll connect with Chris Reeves while we're doing that. Come back, go through the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast community calendar and get caught up on, special elections, and then there's the midterms coming up in just a few short months when you think about it, Wink. All right. You're listening to the After Show on Netroots Radio with Wink and Justice, and we will be right back.
Trump, Trump, Trump. Troops are marching to battle. Boom, boom, boom. Bombs are blowing up communities. Whoosh. Poisonous gas is being released. Forget Syria, ISIS, Iran, Afghanistan. This is Trump's war. Our bellicose commander-in-chief is at war in the homeland, deploying his troops to attack everything from our public schools to the EPA, dropping executive order bombs on Muslim communities in the Mexican border, and spewing poisonous tweets of bigotry and right-wing bile at the media, scientists, inner cities, illegal voters, Meryl Streep, diplomats, Democrats, people who use real facts and, well, Trump is at war with the American majority, with all who do not agree with him. And you thought Nixon had a long enemies list. Yet, Trump's most destructive assault so far has not targeted any one group, but an essential and existential concept: truth. Bluntly put, he's psychotic, believing that truth is whatever he says it is, and that he can change it tomorrow. Years ago, in a futuristic novel, the author wrote about the rise of a tyrannical regime that ruled by indoctrinating the masses to accept the perverse notion of capricious truth. It was George Orwell's 1984, which depicted a dystopia he named Oceania. There, the public had been inculcated to believe that reality is not, quote, something objective, external, existing in its own right. Rather, whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. Now, in 2017, we live in Trumplandia, with a delusional leader of a plutocratic party trying to redefine reality with alternative facts and fake news. This is Jim Hightower saying, but resistance is already surging, including the fact that Orwell's 70-year-old book has become a bestseller again, thanks to Trump resistors seeking, truth.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back. And thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Chris Reeves is moving in a very secure but mobile location in the vast plains of the Midwest. And our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the clouds whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Netroots Radio, and thus by extension, the After Show, to span the globe, the solar system, out past the Oort cloud, and beyond. Woohoo! Okay.
Yes.
Got to get that hyperbole in as quickly as possible. Today's Connect, Unite, Act Daily Codes Community Diary is facilitated as it is every Tuesday by Eric Lewis, and he begins the diary by what he calls it Trash It Forward. And it's essentially, have you ever thrown things away or put things out for people to take, to basically donate as trash and what have you. And he asks, have you ever found anything that you liked in the trash? Just really short, one summer, right before I started college, my best friend's dad was the superintendent of LA County Sanitation. So my best friend wrangled his jobs to work on the garbage trucks for the summer. And the route that he and I were on, different trucks, but was out in Malibu and Beverly Hills and stuff. And people were like throwing away big old like TVs that were only a few months old because they got a new one, for instance. So yeah, there were all sorts of stuff, but there was also an ethical thing about whether you would really, take that home. Usually what occurred is that they would be collected and then either be donated to shelters or community groups that, might be in need of a toaster oven, or even like a whole actual stainless steel tied up. People would throw away ovens, Wink. Big old not Westinghouse, but the expensive kind. Okay, Wisconsin Cossacks are starting their group, and Cosmail Chris the Colodem, if you would like to become a member of Wisconsin Cause. The Colorado Community Caffeinating Liberally group has moved their meetup from their usual place this Saturday, April 22nd, and they'll be meeting at Rooster Cat, 1045 Lincoln Street in Denver, a little bit earlier than normal, 8:30 a.m., and then they're going to be going on the March for Science that will be starting around 10 or 11. So get a hold of Colorado Tim and Left Candid to attend that. Navajo is going to be in New York City the next day, Sunday, April 23rd. That's this weekend, of course, at Spitzer's Corner, 101 Rivington Street in the Ludlow District at high noon. Cosmale Navajo to RSVP, and there's quite a few going to that. The Spring 2017 Cheers and Cheers Cossack Meetup occurs Saturday, April 29th at noon at Flatbread Pizza in Portland, Maine, as the New England Cossacks have a little bit of a planning session for Netroots Nation coming up in Atlanta. And then, of course, the People's Climate March will be occurring with all sorts of sister marches. And there are links galore for all of those sister marches and the main one as well. So go to the diary for those. And the Asheville Cossacks are going to have a meetup on Saturday, May 6th. 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. at Salvage Station, 466 Riverside Drive in Asheville. Cosmale Randalt to RSVP. And then, of course, the Thinky Fella and Ojibwa have organized the third Epic Glacier National Park meetup, held June 30th through July 2nd, and Cosmale them to attend. And then Cosmale Navajo to RSVP a seat for the Daily Co's annual Cheers and Cheers dinner at Netroots Nation. Wednesday, August 9th at 5:30 p.m. And location will be determined as Navajo gets a handle on how many people are coming, and it's always more than whatever venue she's able to choose. And sometimes it's the second largest convention center in town. All right, that is your Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Diary for the 18th of 2017, tax day for some. Certainly not at the top. All right. Okay. Chris, thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy day today, but welcome.
Welcome.
So let's see. Last time we spoke, votes were just coming in for the Kansas Congressional District 04 election. And we did mention about, and I made reference to this during the top half, is that I'm loath to put the proverbial baskets in one basket saying this is the referendum and this is, but there are still lessons to be learned. Did quite well considering, but how much importance do we put in each of these individually rather than the culmination and the narrative that can be derived from it?
Well, okay. So we have multiple special elections going on all over the country. We started off with Kansas. It's Georgia's turn today. In May, we have Montana. We've still got South Carolina out there. These are all races that Republicans pick people to go into their cabinet, not based only on, hey, I think they're going to be good at this, but also they have a tendency to pick, people from very safe districts in order to make sure that those districts stay Republican so that it doesn't impact the balance. So every one of these seats is an uphill climb for a Democrat to win. That having been said, what we can see in a lot of these is both some of the Trump resistance, some of the people who are now motivated because of Trump, and some of the interest amongst the Democratic base who has traditionally not been active in these off-year elections and spring elections. The one thing that we really struggle with as Democrats is we'll turn out for a presidential, and in the off year, we just don't turn out. And that's even more so for these special elections, these spring elections with really, really low turnout. What we started to see in Kansas District 4 was that the Democratic turnout was not bad. I mean, it wasn't necessarily good, and it wasn't great because, again, in an off year, we really struggle, but it was better than some of the initial projections. Most of the models that I had seen really said that, hey, Democratic turnout was going to be really weak just because of the level of interest in the race. And so that's why a lot of Republicans were thinking all the way down to the end, look, this is going to be 12 points or more. And it didn't work out that way. Now, that having been said, still huge numbers of Democrats stayed home, didn't vote. What we're going to find out in Georgia today is whether or not we can take what happened in Kansas and do even better, which is going to be important because Jon Ossoff, he's going to win this first round of the vote. There's almost no question about that. The Republican field is scattered amongst a huge number of people. And so Ossoff will easily be the top candidate, going in. He'll be number one. But that doesn't mean that he wins overall. In order to do that, he has to get 50 plus 1%. So he has to get 50% just one vote, and that would end it. There wouldn't be a runoff. If nobody gets to 50 plus 1, then we have a runoff of the top two contenders. And to be real blunt, that's going to be a much harder fight for Ossoff than trying to win 50 plus 1 right now. Because winning 50 plus 1 today against a scattered field, that's not just the target. That's a good chance to get some confused Republicans and unified Democrats and see what the heck can happen. If the Republicans have all their time to train everything at just Ossoff, it gets interesting.
Now, I suppose the top Republican in the field is Handel, whose reputation is one where, essentially destroyed the Susan G. Komen brand, not on purpose, but now that district being one of the more highly educated, will Komen bring baggage that's negative to her cause, or it being such a conservative district, such a strongly Republican-held district, will what she espoused, her belief on Planned Parenthood, defunding it, and all of that, will that prevail in that district?
Well, it certainly creates, an interesting background. I think the reason why you see some movement behind Bob Gray, who's the other Republican in the race above single digits, is because there is a resistance number, both to Handel and to Gray. They both have detractors. Now, will those detractors, hold their nose if this comes into a runoff and still pull the Republican lever? Well, past data says yes. But this is a strange year. So there's some, hope on behalf of the Ossoff campaign and National Democrats that if either one of the Republicans, let's say we go to a second round, which seems likely. We could end it today, but the likelihood is we go to a second round. That makes things a lot more difficult for our guy, but it may complicate things for the Republicans as well, dependent on how much resistance there is for people who are unhappy about Handel or Gray. And frankly, it also gives Trump time to screw things up even more. And this is an oddity here, but Ossoff's prior work in, related to foreign relations may be a real benefit for him, dependent on how bad continues to muck up, Afghanistan, North Korea, Syria, those kind of things. If we're really looking like, hey, we've kind of screwed the pooch on Trump's handling of foreign policy, then a Democrat with strong foreign policy credentials is not a bad idea against two Republicans who have absolutely nothing, nothing to fall back on as far as, any idea on foreign policy. and again, like I said, that depends on how bad things go for Trump over, it would give them more time to tear into Ossoff, and that's what everyone says. I've had lots of Democrats who go, oh, we have to win today, because if not, it just gives Republicans time to train all their fire at Ossoff in a conservative district. And I point out that's true, and it does make things more difficult. But at the same time, the wild card is Trump. Trump could muck things up. So he's a moving around time bomb. Trump made a robocall today, just as he did for Kansas, in which, and I put the text up in my Twitter feed, where he basically accuses Ossoff of, everything short of stealing your dog. It's just a long rant about what a terrible person Ossoff is. But what it doesn't say, what Trump never gets into, and that I think complicates this race, is that Trump couldn't say, and that's why I'm backing Karen Handel, or this is why I'm backing Bob Gray. He doesn't say either. So there is no anointed Republican, but at some point, somebody's either going to have to bear hug Trump or run away from him. And heaven help the Republican, and I mean this seriously. If Karen Handel sees that Trump's popularity is poor, or if Bob Gray sees it, if either one of them is the nominee, and they all of a sudden go on the attack or the opposition to Trump after he has done this call, Trump strikes me as the kind of guy who would hang you out to dry.
Right.
So there's a lot of chance for a lot of things to happen there. So that's going on. On the other race that a lot of people are starting to pay attention to is, of course, later in May, and that's in Montana. And Montana is the oddball in all of this. The reason why I say that is because Montana has a democratically elected, a Democrat governor. We have a Democratic senator, and not short-term Democratic senators, multi-term. The governor's seat there, I think, is something like 12 years now. And in the governor's race last November, Gianforte, who is the Republican candidate for this House seat, got smacked. And that says something. He ran as the Republican on a ticket where Donald Trump won the state overwhelmingly, but he lost the governor's race by a pretty sizable margin. And that tells you not so much that, hey, Republicans weren't motivated. Republicans turned out for Trump. What they didn't do was turn out for Gianforte. In fact, a whole lot of Republicans had to have pulled the lever against the guy. And that makes for an interesting race with Rob Quist, who is the Democratic candidate. Rob Quist is a traveling musician, a famous musician, and he has played probably every county fair in the dang state. So everybody there knows him. And it's led to some real awkward moments in the campaign, which has stayed mostly, there have been attacks, but it hasn't stooped to, the abortion fight that we had in Kansas 4. What has happened is a lot of the Republicans have led off their arguments against Rob Quist by saying, I know Rob, he's a good guy, but let me tell you, well, the problem is the moment that somebody says, well, they're a good guy, it's really hard to go on the attack. But the reason why they're having to do it is because Rob Quist's name ID is generally associated with he's a good guy, whereas Gianforte's name ID is generally associated with he's a carpetbagger who came in here to, take federal land. And how is that going to shake out? I don't know, but I think we're going to see some pretty interesting things. I'm pretty hopeful for Georgia. It's a work in progress, and we'll see where we go.
I have a question that sort of revolves around the Kansas 04 fight, but it does morph into a more macro question as well. Now, there's an old adage that, like the best places to rob are the houses that are closest to the police department because, they're out on calls, right? So in Kansas 04, that's in the Koch's backyard. Now, of course, when they're out on the call, making sure that the national election, for president is being taken care of, did they really attend very much in their own district that allowed, the numbers to tighten up, from before? And is that indicative of a strategy across the nation, or was it a wake-up call? And because who's telling Trump to call? Is that Ryan? To call into Georgia, and he's made some entreaties into Montana, even Trump has. So
yeah, well, and Trump making entreaties to Montana is a real mixed bag, because the problem is Trump's deal in Montana was he's the outsider who's going to break things up, and Gianforte is seen as the ultimate rich guy insider who they don't think. Trump lining up with him is kind of interesting, and I don't know how much it helps. I'm not sure who's really pushing Trump to do this. I think part of it maybe Trump wants to do it because he's wanting to, throw in some chips in the game and make sure people know that they owe him one. But how does this play out, after this? I don't know. I think that there's a real chance this backfires. I think in KS04 and Kansas 4, there was some backfire to this. The campaign in Kansas 4 didn't want to bring in Trump. They wanted to talk about Brownback, and that's fine. But there's nothing you can do with any campaign to keep Trump out at this point. Because, he is the news. He is the standard bearer. He is the head of the Republican Party. And I think a lot of Republicans, even some moderates, are going to find that Trump is going to make, the water pretty difficult for them. Or I should say more difficult than it has been.
Going to be.
Go ahead.
I was going to mention real quick. I have relatives in Montana, and they're not the most liberal, shall we say, but they express a sentiment in Montana that the state is still, and this is something that people forget, is that they're still angry at the Citizens United ruling that came down that took away Montana's laws to prevent outside corporate money from being pushed into elections. And Forte represents that the carpetbagger aspect. They had laws dating from just before the 1900s that prevented that, and Citizens United turned that over. And there's still animosity about that. So the Trump effect could be a negative there, even among the most, and I got to say, there's some people that are big-time Trump supporters, but they're wondering because of these other issues that they don't find palpable in their region.
Yeah, one of the great things about Montana is if you go back, in fact, you throw it into Google and I think put in Montana silver and political ads, you get the whole story of how, this started out with, mining interests basically trying to steamroll in and take over races, and that's what helped result in this. But I think what's really going to be at play in Montana is that you've got on one side a Democratic candidate who is very well known, and being a local cowboy, he's the local good guy. Everybody knows. Right. He has defined Montana for most of these people's lives. There are people, people who are 15, 20 years younger than him have known this guy for their whole life as, he's the guy that comes and plays the county fair, and he helped us, he helped raise money for when Timmy broke a leg or whatever, that's kind of who he is versus, Gianforte, who's barely short of having a monocle and a top hat, to some of these people. So
Snidely Whiplash, tying the damsel in distress on the tracks. It's classic, right. I know.
So it's going to be, that race to me is the one that is, of the three, if you were starting out at the beginning, I would have told you Montana's race is one that on paper should be better just because they have a sitting Democrat governor and a sitting Democratic senator, whereas, these other two races are just super uphill climbs. That having been said, Trump, being around has motivated some people. It's got people, itching to do something, and we're going to have to see how some of this plays out.
We're running a little bit out of time. We got two other stories about Brownback scrambling to figure out what to do about a hospital closure. We also have Kobach being ordered by a federal judge to give up whatever documents that he was photographed taking into the White House. I guess we can pack that in here in a little bit. You want to tell us about what's happening with that hospital? Because another hospital closing in Kansas, one hospital is probably the equivalent to 100 or more in a state like California. So what's going on?
You broke up there for just a second.
I'm sorry. The Brownback scrambling because of this hospital closure in Kansas. One hospital closing in Kansas is a big deal compared to a larger state. I mean, a larger state like California, that could be the equivalent of 100 or more hospitals closing.
Yeah, this is a powerful negative for Brownback because not only is it a hospital closure, it's a hospital closure right in his backyard. It's not rural. This is a major hospital in not too far from Topeka. Basically, in Topeka proper. So you're talking about losing about 1,600 jobs right on top of the Capitol. Brownback scrambled because he thought he had worked out a sale. Now what they're trying to do is inject a poison pill by making it very difficult for the hospital to go ahead and shut down. We're still expecting the announcement that that's a done deal. And then I think that this brings Medicaid expansion right back into the state house. We voted for it once already and would have no problem overriding the governor again. I think the votes are there now if this shuts down.
Right. Now, does the national political establishment and the Trump administration, do they see this as an inroad? I'm sorry, as an inroad to further the deconstruction of the administrative state? Do they look at this as a good thing, or do they see the political calculation falling against them?
The Brownback people are panicked, and they are convinced that this is a chance to really put a slap on them. Actually, I just have breaking news. Actually, I'll let this before this comes in. So Ron Estes, who won in Kansas 04, resigned as treasurer. The thought was that he would be replaced by someone outside because Kansas 02, which is our House race, now has Paul Davis, who is probably the Democrats' best candidate we've had in a while to run for Congress. And Jacob LaTurner was looked at as the opponent. Well, Sam Brownback has now appointed Jacob LaTurner to treasurer. And so that muddies up the race in Kansas 02 and really puts Republicans scrambling.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's breaking news. Thanks, Chris.
No problem. Sorry, I drunk something wrong.
That's fine. Well, we're gonna have to bug out of here, and we'll catch up with you next week because we'll see the results of all that we've talked about today plus more, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks.
Sounds good.
All right, folks, we are going to bug out of here, as I stated. Tom Hartman coming up about 6 minutes after the hour, of course. In the interim, we'll play Nomad Sinner's Lounge by Micatone, one of my faves, sort of like little trip-hop jazzy things. And stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. And why? Well, because who loves you, baby? Okay, Wink, I'll see you on the other side.
All right, we're out.